Hey folks, welcome back to the rehearsal room. Nick here,
Aaron here.
and thank you guys for checking out the previous couple of episodes if you have. If not, please make your way over to our bio page on our Instagram page, which can be found at the Rehearsal Room Pod. We've also got a Facebook page that we're starting up, even though I know Facebook at this point is pretty antiquated.
We're old. Leave us alone.
We are old. But yeah, we're gonna try to get out there as much as possible. Hopefully, we'll be on most of the bigger streaming platforms pretty soon. As soon as Old Man Aaron and Old Man Nick can figure out what they're doing.
One other thing, also, we have a Spotify listening or a playlist that we're going to try to update as best we can with music we've talked about, things we've talked about on the podcast, and then recommendations that we give each other. And
Yes.
hopefully we share with everybody and with our email address if you have any recommendations.
Yeah, so make sure you check out our contact information wherever you're listening to this, and if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, let us know. But this time around, at the time of this recording, we have now heard of this year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees.
Yes.
So I've got my opinions on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a whole. But we're going to talk about some of the people being nominated this year, maybe a couple of the people in the past. But if Aaron can give us a little bit of a trip back into time to see how it started, how it's going, and where it might end up.
Well, just real quick, just for those, how much people know about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or not, depends on the people. And just as a quick, just so you know, founded in '83, essentially the four major guys were all people that worked within the music industry. The two big founders are a man named Ahmet Ertegun. He ran Atlantic Records, signing people like Ray Charles, Led Zeppelin, Aretha Franklin. And the other big guy in the room was Jan Winter, who was the founder of Rolling Stone magazine. Two of the other big players in there, Seymour Stein, Sire Records. You're talking about the Ramones, Depeche Mode, The Cure, Ministry. He was big in the CBGB scene. As far as signing a lot of Madonna was another one that he had signed. Last one, this was new to me. I'd never heard of this person, but Robert Krasnow. Had a small label called Blue Thumb. Had Captain Beefheart. Was then put in charge of Elektra Records. With at the time he signed people like Chaka Khan, Kraftwerk, Funkadelics. So these are people that have been around in the business that was music.
Right.
And founded it in 1983. It is in Cleveland. The reason they will tell you is because a very famous at the time DJ Alan Freed was a guy who coined the phrase rock and roll. The other thing he's famous for is the payola scandal that ruined his entire career. A very shady character in some ways and also innovative in a lot of other ways.
So he is also in the Hall of Fame for that.
He very much, I believe he is in the Hall of Fame. I think,
okay.
yeah. And again, the payola thing did ruin his career. He was not the only one taking it.
Right.
But things that I've learned about him through other podcasts I've listened to, he's also a guy that record labels would essentially say, hey, if you play this record, you get publishing.
Right.
So songs he wasn't even in the room for, let alone wrote.
He's getting money
He's
off
getting
of
money off it.
Yeah.
So, of course, he's going to play your record more, and suddenly it becomes a hit.
Yeah.
There's three other people, two of which are attorneys, also help, but those are the main things. So it's in Cleveland. The ceremony, though, that is held once a year, is in New York because you cannot get rock stars to go to Cleveland voluntarily.
Right.
So New York is much easier to get them, and that's where they have the ceremony every year.
Also, I don't think planes fly into Cleveland.
Yeah, they're still working on that airport. Their river's still on fire. So
trains go there, but airplanes don't.
right.
Yeah. So, right off the bat, record label bigwigs, attorneys,
Absolutely.
obviously people who care about the art and the artists.
To,
right?
I mean, to some degree, look, signing Aretha Franklin, signing Led Zeppelin, thank you very much. How much they cared about the music as opposed to the money I could make off of this music.
I think
Absolutely. I mean, these are rich white business guys. They're
Sure.
not, I think they love music, but they also love the money they can make
They
from the
love the
music.
money, yeah.
And when you look at some of the deals, especially Mr. Erdogan's Atlantic Records deal with Stax Records, let's just say if you didn't have a good attorney, you got screwed.
Right,
And
right.
it was no problem with him, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Please continue. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, seeing that these people were in charge, I'm already a little, weary of or wary of trusting them to make the call of who goes in and who doesn't.
Oh, for sure.
Quick aside, I should put it out there. I am not a fan of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think it's kind of a silly institution
Like,
as a whole,
yes,
right?
I totally agree.
It makes people kind of go back and forth unnecessarily about, like why this one should and why one
Thank
shouldn't,
Thank you. This time of year, that's all you see in discourse
Right,
online
yes.
with music fans is how could this band? And I don't understand that. Like, good God.
Exactly. Like why it should be this one and not that one.
Right.
And ultimately I don't think it should have been called the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It could have just been like the greatest music museum in the world. And I would have been okay with that, I think.
I think too, I don't wish to assume, but we've known each other long enough. I think it also is a reflection of something I know we will touch on, is to say, when you put 5 white guys in a room, the idea of seeing past rock and roll and understanding what's coming and what's going to be, they have no idea of that.
Exactly.
So calling it rock and roll, which in and of itself, rock and roll doesn't really exist.
Right.
The themes of rock and roll, what rock and roll represents, I think do.
The feeling of what that term kind of brings up.
Absolutely. I think it still exists.
Yeah,
but
sure.
nobody makes rock and roll anymore,
Right.
And yes, I'm with you. Like, you're right. If this was as far as the museum is concerned, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that you can visit,
Sure.
I'm all for it. I think that's amazing. You could see so
Even
many.
that, I think I'm still a little, because famously they lost one of Lemmy's jackets, like one of his
did they?
favorite
Okay.
jackets, and like they never made any effort to look for it or even replace it. So it's like, what are you guys doing?
Well, and again, I guess what I mean is to say, I like any kind of museum that will want to collect the history of something,
Of
so
course.
that everyone can have that touchstone. You
Sure.
can bring your kid to see these things. There's Jimi Hendrix guitar that he played at Woodstock. Those things are important because music is important to all of us.
Of course.
So in that regard, I love it. You're right, though. The politics of it, the idea of it. I'm not Marlon Brando here, but the awarding of art with an award, it's so subjective and silly. And then let's be honest, when you start missing people, you start get a backlog of people that should have gone in long ago, and now it's ridiculous.
Because also to me, it seems like at one point everybody from the past is gonna get in. It's just not gonna be this particular year or the next.
Sure.
So that we'll get to that part of the conversation a little bit on, but let's check out who some of the nominees are.
So this year's nominees, as I read, was you have a nominating committee. I believe it's about 30 people on this list, this committee that you definitely would know. Questlove, Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine, a longtime Rolling Stone writer, but he's written a million things. David Fink, I think is how you say his name. There are people on this committee that people out here we know. Frick. Thank you. Again, these are people who have been in the industry for some time. Dave Grohl, of course, because it is the time.
He has to be in everything.
Yeah, well,
right?
I think you're obligated at this point.
Yeah.
One of the things that you're definitely seeing now that was always a criticism of them, they have gotten much better at it, which is including, obviously, diversity, really, when it comes right down to it. Which, it's definitely a critical thing to be said because the beauty of music is its diversity.
Sure.
So to have nothing but a bunch of dudes in there, I don't care what your color is, and it's just nothing but a cock party, like, what are we doing here? So now you're seeing much more diversity color-wise. You're seeing much more diversity female-wise, which is a good thing. Please.
The fact that this is 40 years after the fact,
Yeah.
a norm,
slow to change our old white guys. Let's be completely honest,
yeah.
And it's a shame, especially when you are, rock and roll, even in its infancy, is pushing against the norm. So this idea that you can sign Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles, but it doesn't occur to you to necessarily put people of color on a board to decide if Ray Charles and Miss Franklin get in.
Right.
Seems a little weird to me. You know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah.
Recently with Mr. Jan Warner, who is no longer on the committee, actually, his last comments, I believe, were something to the effect that women and people, minorities, they're not great interviews, I think is what I heard from him.
Crazy.
Again, it's really crazy, especially when you think of the history of that magazine. Again, it was very leftist when it came out. It was pushing against the man for its time. So to have these views, you're just like, I guess you just live long enough to be the bad guy, you know. It makes you wonder, you know.
Yeah.
But he is no longer part of the selection committee. So the selection committee this year, they choose. I don't know if there's a exact number, but the selection committee this year chose. We have Bad Company, The Black Crowes, Mariah Carey, Chubby Checker, Joe Cocker, Billy Idol, Joy Division / New Order, because God forbid they can't go in separately.
Separately, yeah.
Cyndi Lauper. Help me with this one, Nick, because I'm just a me. Mana. Oasis, Outkast, Fish, Soundgarden, and the White Stripes.
Yeah.
Now, the committee will have put those names out. There are over, what they say, 1,200 international voters that will decide, of those, 5 to 7 that will actually be inducted this year.
Is there a public opinion vote?
There is. I didn't look much into that, but you and I could go, I believe, as I understood it, we can go on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame website and we can cast our vote.
Because I know in the past when somebody didn't get in for whatever reason, people have kind of gotten those I forget the term, but like they add their signature to something.
Yes.
And
famously, Rush, the fans of that, I said Rush, Nick.
Okay.
Nick
Sorry,
has just for future reference, Nick has a real problem hearing the word Rush. It just goes blank in his
it sounds
ear.
like static to
Yeah,
me.
again, for those who are listening other than Nick, Rush, it was their fans very much did that. They petition. They started a petition and got signatures and so on and so forth. I don't know if the fan voting started that way or if they had already had it, but I do think that was kind of one of the bigger catalysts in pushing and promoting the fan vote of it. Okay. Yes.
All right. So from this group of nominees, I got to be honest, I don't see anything really that stands out. I mean, there are a few that I think if gun to my head, I was asked who would go in. There are maybe 3 or 4 that I think.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But like Bad Company.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I again, and you would say, look, Bad Company has songs I like. Their lead singer, I think, is one of the great rock voices. I love him in Free. And I don't know why his name is escaping me right now. He ended up singing with Queen eventually when they went on their We're Old and Need More Money tour.
Yeah.
He's a hell of a good singer. He's amazing. Free's really great. One of those great 70 rocks bands. And Bad Company's got some good songs, especially the early stuff, But are you telling me there's people now that are going like, what are my influences? Well, clearly Bad Company.
Bad Company, right.
That's what I think. I look at this list. The one that, I'll be honest, and I'm not even really much of a fan. The one that stands out to me is Joy Division and New Order. I know they weren't the innovators. Nobody ever does it alone.
Sure.
But their influence is huge when it comes to that type of music. And certainly certainly in our world, there are a lot of bands that you and I still listen to that would say those were huge influences.
That brings me to my next question.
Please.
What is the eligibility? The criteria.
I got you. No. The criteria, I'm not smart enough to memorize this, so it is written down on a piece of paper, everybody. To be eligible, the number one thing, and at least in my Google research, pinpointing this exactly is not exactly easy, which I think is some of the problem also. What we definitely know is, number one, artists are eligible for nomination 25 years after releasing their first commercial recording. So you must have released an album. It's got to be 25 years since you did, though.
Okay.
The other criteria are influence. How has the art influenced other musicians and music culture? Okay. Career, length and scope of artist's career. Now, how you judge that, I don't know. You could
Yeah.
say that there are certain bands that, quite frankly, with one album probably did more than some bands who put out 15. So,
Sure.
and I guess that goes to influence then. You defer.
Yeah, because like influence, are you gonna let's say a band
Please.
like Motorhead.
Yes.
Are you gonna look at the bands that all of the bands that had come after Motorhead that list them as an influence and then say, wow, what a great job, you get in. Like
Where does I feel you exactly like? So where does if their influence counts, how many bands that are influenced by them
how
get to
is
go
that,
in?
Yeah, how is that counted? Is it just influence on bands or influence on
Culture.
Culture.
It does say culture,
right?
It does.
Influence on like the sound of the band.
Sure. Production.
The production.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all that stuff like
Well, and I think to your point, here's an interesting one because this is usually what most people argue about. There's no doubt of Motorhead's influence to some degree on Metallica.
Sure.
And Metallica went in before Motorhead.
Right.
So you do say to yourself, well, then if the band that influenced the band you're putting in isn't already in, then where's the influence?
Right.
You know?
Are they looking at sales too? Like album sales?
It does not
stuff
say
like
that, but again, you could look at that and say career, length, and scope. Well, scope, that's an open word.
Sure.
It's not just a mouthwash. You could say record sales matter. Listen, if you watch the ceremonies, now they are televised. It used to be they were not televised. They used to be something where you could actually buy DVDs and watch them.
Yeah.
Now they are televised. HBO used to run them all the time. I think Disney now is doing it. So what will happen is they will usually bring on a person to induct that person, usually chosen by the band themselves or somebody within whoever's going in.
Yeah.
That person will proclaim their utter love of this band and how they're so amazing and so on and so forth. And there are times where, yes, last year, for instance, Foreigner went in. Sammy Hagar put them in. He did speak of their popularity and their record sales to some degree, We can't pretend those don't matter when we're talking about what is ostensibly mainstream music to a degree. And, to a bunch of industry people, that does matter. They think if you've sold 1 million records, well, then clearly you must be influential.
You matter. Right?
You matter, of course.
See, that's also part of what cheapens this whole thing.
I
is
couldn't
because
agree
if
with
it's
you more.
just numbers, like how many units sold.
To
then-
pretend it's not a factor, I think is naive at best. I don't know if it's the ultimate factor, but
which makes sense of why Metallica got in before Motorhead.
before Motorhead or an Iron Maiden or a Judas Priest, ones that people still to this day lose their minds about.
Right.
But that's why I say under that criteria. Impact is the last one. I'm sorry.
Okay.
How an artist impacted the world and generations of music fans. Well, I got to give it to Joy Division and New Order. I think they fit that criteria. You know what I mean? Again, of their generation, are they the only ones that were doing that sound? I mean, I'm not. I think you're a little more astute in this than I am. What are we looking at? Bauhaus? Would that be somebody that would be kind of the precursor?
Kind of contemporaries.
Okay. So is Bauhaus in there? Then if you're talking about, because again, I think we would agree, there's never really one person that invents something.
Sure.
It's the conglomerate of the two. Bauhaus does sound different than necessarily Joy Division, but there are similarities.
Joy Division, obviously Interpol is a more recent band.
Yes, which clearly is influenced by Joy Division.
So anybody that's got the whole sad boy, monotone voice.
Yes.
With the incredibly rhythmic bass,
yes,
and like the tingly, almost it sounds like
jangly
crystalline guitars,
Yeah.
Any band that you can think of is obviously influenced by Joy Division, and New Order when they started doing all the the stuff they did in the 80s, all the dance stuff, that of course that influenced a lot of other bands. I mean, Orgy, a more recent band.
For sure,
covered Blue Monday and made a whole career out of it.
Absolutely, literally.
Yeah, right.
I think that's all they play in shows.
Pretty much, I think.
You love Blue Monday.
So
Here's Blue Monday again. Yeah.
So I can see of why they would get in. I could also see why Mana would get in.
Okay.
They've been doing it since the mid to late 80s. You know,
I mean, they're they're Mexico, right? They're
Mexico.
so for a Mexican rock band, they're one of the few. I have heard of them. I've heard their music. I mean, they are huge. These guys here in LA, they sell out stadiums.
Oh yeah, stadiums. Yeah, and so like, if it's about rock oriented music, rock and roll, they are one of the innovators of rock en español.
Okay,
you know, so it's like. It's kind of a no-brainer of why they should be in already. Or
Is there an American equivalent that you could say? In turn, it doesn't have to be like they sound alike, but I mean,
stylistically.
You're saying Mexican rock.
Yeah.
You know, like, is that a different style than rock as an American white guy would know, or is it's just they're putting their spin on rock and
they're putting their spin on it.
Okay.
I mean, culturally, there's a lot more differences there.
Understandably,
you know. Just the way the instrumentation is also different.
Okay.
Because they might use some maybe more folk instruments in some parts, you know, and obviously they talk about different subject matter.
I got you. But when you say rock, we're talking not Metallica, maybe not more Led Zeppelin.
Not even like Led Zeppelin.
Oh, okay.
Different. Like,
okay.
More like just. Geez, that's a good question, actually.
I mean, rock is such a broad word. That's why
it is. See, that's a little difficult because like I don't even want to say they're like Mexico's Creedence Clearwater because that wouldn't be fair to either band.
Well,
I think, you know?
maybe as you're saying this, maybe this is the case you're making for them. The fact that you can't compare them to an American band,
for sure.
Maybe that says a lot about them. That they stand out because of that.
Yeah, and
there is no American equivalent. They are their own thing.
I would have put in Maná for sure. I would have put in El Tri.
Okay.
Maybe Caifanes would deserve another spot because those are like the big three.
Okay.
Oh,
interesting. Okay.
I know there was an argument made before for a band from Argentina called Soda Stereo.
Okay.
Which incredibly influential.
Okay.
Great music, like gets poppy at times and gets kind of weird at times. And just because it's sung in Spanish and it sounds different, I think a lot of people get turned off by it. But this is all rock-oriented music, So if we're looking at all the things what's in the criteria to be eligible, they should classify. They should qualify. I mean.
And again, this is you are bringing up a criticism that has been lobbied at this place for a long time. That you're picking essentially American bands.
Yeah, and British bands.
Well, right? Certainly yes, yeah. But I mean, it's to say. You're right. Yeah, American and British bands, and knowing that, I mean, essentially. One of the things I read was like Canadian bands. Well, you got, essentially Joni Mitchell and you got Neil Young and I think there's like two others,
Yeah.
And you just, now Rush.
Rush.
Again, I said
and,
Rush.
Leonard Cohen.
But yeah, Leonard Cohen, exactly. And you go, I agree with all of those.
Sure.
I think they're all artists I very much enjoy. I have no problem with any of them. But I do think of things, what about the Tragically Hip? Sure. Not a huge fan, but I just recently watched a documentary on them, and quite frankly, I don't think they sound like anybody else except the Tragically Hip.
Yeah.
So yes, you're right about the international part of it. If you are going to call yourself the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and essentially put yourself on a pedestal that says we are the authority on rock and roll, and one of the beauties of rock and roll is that it has been exported to other countries, putting their twist on it, and that's the beauty of it. Then we need to include those for sure.
For sure, yeah. So like, I also think of like, what do you think about Mariah Carey being nominated?
That's a tough one for me. Yeah, I won't pretend to be a fan. You cannot deny her ability.
She's also like the top selling artist.
I think
like female artist.
There's no doubt about it. Right. I mean, God knows the memes of her Christmas song alone. There's no denying her talent.
Right.
The girl can sing. Yeah. She's got a hell of a good voice. She very much comes out around the same time, Whitney Houston, that sort of thing. So she got comparisons.
Yeah.
She did sell a lot of records. She made good songs. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be a fan, but her albums are not bad. People did like them and bought them. Can I tell the story of music? Let's just put it that way. Without Mariah Carey, I think I could.
But that's also. That story isn't complete, because Whitney Houston gets in. I think Mariah Carey deserves to get in.
I'm not against it. Well, and I think it's another thing. You and I have talked about this prior. Was I said this about the last one. Pat Benatar got in.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to myself, if Pat Benatar was Pat with a penis, I don't think she's getting in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Right.
And the more I thought about that, I said to myself, you know what? You're missing the point, Aaron.
Yeah.
Like, that is the point. She doesn't have a penis. And the reality is that while you may not be a big fan, her influence in the 80s, she was one of the big rock stars of the 80s, especially thanks to MTV, stuff like that, with a non-conventional rock voice, which means girls could watch MTV who maybe didn't have Stevie Nicks' voice and say, oh, I too can start a rock band and do that. If that's influence, I'm all for that.
Right.
And Mariah Carey, again, you're right. I'm sure there are many women. I'm sure if you found an Alicia Keys, and
Totally. Yeah.
That's just sorry everybody, but that's as late as I go. I don't know who's popular necessarily now. I think there's a Dua Lipa, I believe there's out right now.
Yeah.
Maybe if you pulled them, they would say absolutely. You know, I bet Taylor Swift would probably put her in a top 5. If that's the case, then fine. I don't have a problem with it.
I also think because you don't know the influence she's had in what artists, because maybe you don't follow that type of music or whatever, right?
Absolutely. Excellent point.
So
Excellent point.
I would also, if it were up to me, I'd probably put in somebody like Kathleen Hanna, who comes from like that whole scene, right?
For sure.
Bands like Bratmobile and stuff.
Well,
like
just
of this
the
nature.
Riot Girl movement that she starts with Bikini Kill, right?
Bikini
I mean,
Kill,
that's a huge. Now her influence will never be as big as Mariah Carey's. You know what I mean?
but it's
impactful. There's no doubt.
And also in the musical world that she's in, she's the biggest.
She is absolutely.
Right? Like there's no Riot Girl movement without Kathleen Hanna being mentioned.
It's interesting for all that Courtney gets, why Hannah doesn't get more.
Exactly.
I'm with you 100%.
So just because we don't necessarily recognize the influence right off the bat, because I was even thinking like White Stripes.
Oh, you were ready. Nick, get out of my mind.
So.
I love the White Stripes.
You know me. I love them.
I love them.
Absolutely love them. They actually popularized the musical duo on stage.
For sure. And that garage rock,
Detroit,
indie, the whole thing. I get it.
So the influence and impact, while I know there's a lot of people out there that don't particularly like Jack White, mainly speaking for one Connor Oberst, who at his shows will voice his disdain of Jack White, which is funny. Quick side story.
Please.
My wife Amy and I went to Nashville to go see Connor Oberst perform, and a large portion of the between song banter was him just bad mouthing Jack White, which is hilarious.
Wow. It was awesome. Any idea why this is?
No, I'm still wondering why.
Okay.
So if anybody can figure that out, let me know, because my wife and I are very interested. But anyway,
Connor, if you're listening,
Connor, if you're listening to this, which I know you must
Jack,
be,
or Jack,
just drop us a line, let us know. But yeah, so like the impact and influence, no doubt, tons of garagey, lo-fi sounding bands came out after the White Stripes were big. There's a lot more popular duos, that are out there. True Widow being a great one. Not that they're influenced by White Stripes, but just the fact that a duo exists.
Oh, they're 3.
Oh shit! Well, all right. Well,
I would say the biggest one that and it actually got bigger than the White Stripes in a lot of ways. Black Keys.
There you go. Black Keys. Yeah. I mean, from Ohio.
Yeah.
So
and way bigger than the White Stripes in a lot of ways.
Way bigger than the White Stripes. Yeah, because they get a bunch of shit. Well, and going to kind of back up the White Stripes.
Please.
They have. Jack White has record shops where he presses records and signs bands and all this stuff, So it's like, what more impact would you need to make out there? Like if you're playing guitar on a piece of wood that drifted in from the beach,
right,
and put a couple of camel hairs on it, and you're able to play a guitar solo, that's pretty good. And if people get inspired and influenced by that, that has to amount to something.
The fact that he could stand next to the Edge and not vomit while he's trying to play with the guy from Led Zeppelin,
right? There you go.
That alone puts him in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, as far as I'm concerned. But I'm going to sit here and say, thank you, Nick. You just convinced me, because White Stripes were on my list to say I don't know if they go in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, even as a fan. But you've convinced me. Okay, I'm okay with it. I think this is the beauty of the. Again, I would also say with all that you said about Mana.
Yeah.
This is why diversity matters in a room like this, because you can make that. You're right. I'm not a Mariah Carey fan. I'm not in the necessarily pop R&B, area. I understand how good she is technically.
Yeah.
To a degree, you know what I mean? And I understand how popular she is. But you're right. This is why you need a black woman in the room, or any woman in the room, because somebody who is in that area, Questlove can speak far more to the impact of a Mariah Carey than I'm going to be able to, or certainly a Jan Winner. You know what I mean?
I even think arguments like this could be made for like Outkast.
For sure.
More so than Bad Company. Because
yes,
I've heard people call Outkast a one-hit wonder, and I kind of recoil in horror, and I'm like, okay, because that just means you haven't heard the other fucking awesome songs that they have.
Even if you just lined up their hits, they're at least 12 deep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, Bombs Over Baghdad, Sorry Miss Jackson, Hey Ya. I mean, dude, they have a ton. Rosa Parks. I mean, I am a fan. I think Outkast is one of the most innovative hip hop groups in a long time.
Which also, the inclusion of hip hop.
Thank you. That is always the argument, right? Now, please go ahead.
So I was going to just kind of present this.
Please.
Why not include things that would influence or were influenced by all this other style of music, right?
For sure.
So I know rock and roll is the phrase.
Right.
But it all comes from somewhere else.
For sure.
And it all goes to other places.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I'm not saying like I'm going to make an argument for Korn to be in,
No,
even though one could be made.
Yes.
But
and they probably will, let's be honest.
For sure. Yeah. And when we get to that point, we'll go online and read all the complaints, right?
Right.
So why not hip hop? Why not rap?
I have always, you are, again, we are simpatico on this. I have never understood why people get so mad. And the number one thing they say, it's not rock and roll. Well, first of all, rock and roll doesn't exist.
Right.
As it was formulated in the 52 or 54, whenever this guy said it.
Right.
Okay? The reality is, when you called it rock and roll, we look back at it now and we realize Elvis, Jerry Lee were doing rockabilly and country. Mm-hmm. When we look back at Ray Charles, he was doing rhythm and blues and even adding some jazz. Motherfucker did a country album, for fuck's sake. It's his best-selling album. So it's to say, to me, hip-hop is rock and roll in every sense of its meaning, if you will.
The style, the presentation,
absolutely. Yes.
The subservience of like, or the non-subservience, I should say, to what's the standard or the norm.
And talk about pushback. Fuck the police. The message from Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. I mean, these guys were the same thing a punk band was telling you about the government. They were saying the same fucking thing.
Exactly.
Well, Black Flag was calling them pigs. NWA saying fuck the police.
Right.
So to me, I have never had a problem with hip hop being inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because again, if we're really being honest, you're right. Excuse me, this is a museum of music.
Right.
In that case, you cannot deny. The reality of the situation is hip-hop now is our rock stars.
Yes, yeah, for
the
sure.
The biggest rock stars in America right now are all hip-hop artists. Every one of them other than a Taylor Swift and a Beyonce.
Right.
Everyone else are hip-hop artists.
Which, good thing you mentioned Queen Bee. So Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis played rockabilly and country. Both styles of music famously being derivatives of black music.
Yes.
So
certainly the blues, for sure.
Yeah, but even before, even country,
Yeah.
So like that's why, I mean, it's understandable to me of why Beyonce would win the best country album,
Yeah.
People get pissed, but it's like, hey man, this is her just making a nod to the heritage of this style of music.
Well, and again, if it was the best country album, who gives a shit what the color of the person who made it? I mean, if it was the best country album,
it was about the music.
It was about the best country album. Who cares?
Right.
It didn't matter that if she made the best country album according to whoever voted for it, then that's just the way it is.
Right. Now it does mean a lot more that a black woman wins.
Of course.
It means tons more. But for the people to get upset about it to the level that they are, it's like kind of insane.
Again, these are people who don't understand the history of music in general. It's not their country. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah,
like there's a lot of it. And as I myself am a big country fan, I prefer the older stuff for the most part. I'm not a modern country guy, But one thing I have learned over and over again, for everyone who calls it pop country, everything has been pop country at some point.
At some point, yeah.
You
Everything
know,
is
and
pop.
and when you go back, and if it's different when you were, yes, the Carter family, okay, maybe not pop music, got it, but we're talking folk music. We're talking him, you know, as the story goes, him and I can't remember the other guy's name. I wish we should all know it. Him and a black guy traveled around into the mountains of the Ozarks and so on and so forth, and were collecting songs. They go and record these things as the Carter family, and this becomes the, if you will, the Ten Commandments, the tableau that becomes what country music becomes. But after that, they're taken from all sorts of different,
from everywhere.
everywhere.
Which
So
I thought was what music was supposed to be.
again, yes. And by the way, interesting that, again, this is what's funny about the hip hop thing too. By the way, Johnny Cash in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Willie Nelson just got put in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Nobody bats an eye. Nobody loses their shit. Dolly Parton 2 years ago got put in. She actually gave a letter that said, I'm
thank
good.
you. Yeah.
I'm all right. It's okay. Now, mind you, all three of them, no one would deny belong in the Country Music Hall of Fame. And they all are. But nobody batted an eye to see them in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And now, I get it because their country now sounds like it's got a little rock and roll in it, which early Cash definitely was. It was rockabilly. Sure. You know what I mean? But, you know, it is the hip hop thing to me has always been interesting. I've never understood the backlash with it in general, but let alone in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like, it didn't belong when you put all these, you know, Kraftwerk, I believe, is in it. Well, they don't even play instruments. I mean, they're keyboard. You know what I'm saying? I don't mean, but like rock, they're not a drummer. It's not a drum, bass, and guitar. But you can't deny their influence. You can't deny the innovation of it all.
For sure, yeah.
So,
and if that's going to be a factor, then we're
Then we're
dropping the
in.
ball, you know, by not including all these hip hop and rap acts.
Amen. I like I said, I have always assumed, I hate doing it, but, you know, to pretend that there isn't a slice of racism in some of the discourse when it comes to hip hop, I don't think it's everybody. And by the way, I get that certain music styles aren't for you. Sure. That's okay. You don't have to listen to everything. That doesn't mean they don't get to get in because you don't like it.
Right.
I'm not a big reggae guy, but Bob Marley deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
For sure, yeah.
There's no doubt his influence, his impact, so on and so forth. Fuck you. He deserves to be in there. And I'll help put him in, even though I don't want to listen to any of his records.
Yeah.
You know, because you have to be objective about this. If we're doing a museum, if we're saying a history of something, we must be objective and say, look, we're telling a story here. It doesn't matter what you like or I like. It's what the story needs, you know?
Well, I think that's just it, too. I think the trying to be objective or to stay objective while telling that story,
it's hard.
It is hard. You know, that's why I think it would be better if it was just like, this is the world's best music museum.
I hear you, yeah. But it doesn't have a flashy name.
Well, yeah, you know, if somebody can work on that. Please,
yes,
yeah,
no, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, but you know,
like,
you know, I don't mind it being in a museum or having the whole ceremony of being put in the museum.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just that this criteria makes it so it almost pits people against each other. You know,
well, and let's be honest, much like any list, that's the point.
Yeah.
I mean, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame feasts off this shit. This is free publicity of everyone, the discourse of, I can't believe, da-da-da-da-da-da. I mean, I literally saw a band you and I are not fans of, but their entrance into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I would not be against it at all. Iron Maiden.
Right.
I literally saw this. Now, granted, I know online is not where you want to get the best of the best. I get it, but nonetheless. Where people were like, I can't believe it, another year, blah, 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 blah. Gee, I guess they would have had to make a country album. Or maybe if they did a diss track about some guy, some other rapper, maybe then they'd get put into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yeah. All right, well, now you've just said a lot more about you than you've said about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
You're being somewhat subtly racist.
A little bit, and more importantly, what does any of that have to do with Iron Maiden? If you want to discuss the fact that Iron Maiden is being slighted by not being put in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that's a discussion, and I'm willing to have it. But it's got nothing to do with these other artists in any way, shape, or form.
I won't have that discussion just because It's Iron Maiden.
No, again, I'm simply
No,
saying,
I know.
like, if we're going by their criteria, even,
Yeah,
I
of
think,
course,
I think
of
they
course.
get a lot of those
They
marks.
get in, yeah.
No doubt about it.
Yep.
It is ironic that Metallica went in before Judas Priest.
For sure.
You know.
Yeah.
Now, I will say also, I was touching on it before, and I'm shocker. Aaron got sidetracked, but I do wonder. As I said before, they are televised now.
Yeah.
They were not before. I do wonder how much of that influences voting. Because who's going to bring more views, Metallica or Judas Priest?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If Metallica's going to play live, that's going to bring more people to want to watch it than Judas Priest.
Yep.
On average, right? So you do, and again, I'm not saying it's not about music or that they don't care about music, but to pretend, hey, somebody's got to pay for Bruce Springsteen to get to New York. You know what I'm saying? Like that hotel suite and the fucking dinner doesn't pay for itself.
I mean, he can fly himself over.
He could, but I have a feeling he gets a free ride.
That's right. He owns the plane.
He is the boss after all. As long as it doesn't land in Nebraska. Anyway, it's one of those things where I say to myself, that's something I've always wondered watching. Because, again, with you, I am not necessarily a fan of it in what it is doing. I do love the museum part of it. I love the preserving of history of it.
Sure.
I appreciate that. I do watch the ceremony for a lot of reasons. Number one, every now and again, there's some bands I really do give a shit about. So it's nice to see them get their flowers. Sometimes bands reunite on this thing that were never together before. The other thing that I really love about it is, as I said, they will bring somebody out to present them. They'll go into their little speech about how great they are when maybe they met them or something, go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And then they will go to essentially a package video that gives a quick, brief Wikipedia-style history of the band.
Yeah.
I love stuff like that. I live for stuff like that. So that's neat to see, especially for a band that maybe I don't know enough about or know anything about. That's kind of cool. I look for that. When they give their speech, I fast forward through that shit. I'm not interested.
But
in
at
that
one
part.
point,
Please,
especially with one of the criteria being that you can only be nominated 25 years after your first commercial record, right? At one point, and I think I mentioned this before, it's going to be all the legacy bands, and every band is going to be a legacy band 25 years after the fact.
Yeah, and again, this is, and let me look again, because I wanted to make sure I had all the facts. I don't need to get sued by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for lying about it. There are other inductee categories. This is where it's called, oops, we fucked up, so we put you in other shit.
Yeah.
So you have an early influences on rock category.
Okay.
From what I've seen, and again, I haven't seen them all, but that is a lot of oops.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like Sister Rosetta Thorpe is actually super influential, and we didn't discover it for the last 25 years because we never bothered to look into it.
Right.
Last year, one that you and we talked about that really shocked us both in a way, MC5s went in.
Yeah.
Like, wait, 2024 and the MC5s weren't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Do you know if Iggy Pop is in it?
I believe he is, and I think the Stooges.
Okay.
Yes. Probably 5 or 6 years ago, at most.
All right. Well,
I believe both of them are, though. The other category is sidemen, so supporting musicians. I would assume a lot of these are essentially session musicians, guys that have through the years played on amazing albums,
this
stuff like that.
feels like honorary mentions, which is like what people get in the Oscars.
Oh,
right?
Oh, yeah, no. If you get into the early influences, sidemen, and the third one, non-performers, producers, entrepreneurs, journalists, and disc jockeys, it's usually kind of the in memoriam, but not the in memoriam.
Yeah.
They usually do a quick. Now I will say this was interesting. Again, the diversity part of it that I think they are genuinely trying to make. A woman who ran Motown.
Yeah.
After Berry Gordy, Berry Gordy, I think, still owned it, but she was running it.
Yeah.
Female, black female. She takes over kind of at the latter days of I think the Jacksons are gone at this point. Motown is not what we know it with the Supremes and all the great Motown acts of the 60s. She takes over and kind of brings it back. She got put in with the non-performers showing her career, what she was able to achieve, and so on and so forth. Again, that's great. Black woman, being, especially in a super male-dominated area, fantastic. Give her flowers. She deserves it, so on and so forth. You know what I mean? So I do think there are ways there are people that are influential, musically, that maybe didn't pick up an instrument, you know what I mean? But their production, we are fans, Steve Albini, I would say, I think his bands are great, but his production style, especially in the music we listen to, highly influential. He was in the In Memoriam last year, got a pretty good round of applause. Will he go into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Probably not.
Probably not. And I would have put any of his bands in there. Big Black.
Big Black, absolutely. Right? Shellac is I love Shellac. Again, I'm not against that. Again, when I look at this list, like I said, you talked me into the White Stripes, pal, because I was kind of like, I fucking love you, but I don't know, because, and some of it too, admittedly, is I'm not into music that's coming out now, essentially popular music, I should say.
Yeah.
So their influence on what's being played now, I don't know.
See, that's another thing too. Okay, good thing you got.
Please.
So, the one that I know is Chapel Roan.
Yeah, I know the name.
So I would say incredibly influential, especially because the popularity she has. Are we gonna wait 25 years to put her in there? Because she definitely has the sales, right?
Yeah, I think maybe the 25 years is also to, depending on how you look at that list, is to not put the one-hit wonders, not get the ones that,
Thank you for saying that. So why is Chubby Checker there?
This is
because he made a one-hit wonder and then tried to make a sequel that did not.
Oh, not just a sequel, my friend. I have learned it's not just one. He made essentially. You give him a dance, he'll figure out a song. By the way, didn't write the song. Dick Clark, famously, he propped him up. He did try to have a career. Dick Clark got this song, knew Chubby was going to be perfect. And by the way, I just happen to have American Bandstand.
Yes.
So that's an easy way to promote the shit out of this thing, and it's going to become huge. Not to say it's a bad song. And quite frankly, I kind of like his voice even on that song. It's a fun song.
Fun song, but come on.
No,
right?
In no way, shape, or form. He didn't invent the dance craze song, right? He glommed onto something that had been done a million times.
Sure.
I forget his name now. Land of a Thousand Dances. That guy alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wilson Pickett. Fuck you. That's the greatest dance song there ever. You know what I mean? If you really want to, especially for his time. He is, in all full disclosure, another podcast that I listened to with the history of rock and roll. Talked about with the Chubby Checker thing, because I thought it was very interesting. I didn't realize all this. He's very upset at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that he is not in. He does not understand why he is such a footnote in rock and roll, and so on and so forth. Now, The Twist also has one of those weird things where it's actually a hit like 4 different times or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like crazy, right?
Yeah.
Crazy to think, But yeah, you're right. Like,
I'm even going to be.
I would say, actually, you know what? Put the 45 in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
There you go.
But Chubby himself does not need to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I'm even going to argue against putting Joe Cocker in. Now,
okay.
let me do this. Great voice, right? I don't know about voice of an angel, but great voice, right?
Distinctive.
But is mostly famous for a cover song.
For most people,
right?
yes.
Like a lot of people know him. Maybe the majority of people know him as, that's the Wonder Years guy.
Yes, I would say the You Are So Beautiful is certainly a massive song for him. His earlier days with Joe Cocker and the Dogs or something, the English Dogs or something like that, that was a guy. See,
that's another band.
Well, it was him. He's the front guy for it. I believe they played Woodstock. Right. He was very popular at that time. I think what that shows is there are people remembering somebody who was popular in a moment or had those moments.
Yep.
He was also famously lampooned by Jim Belushi or John Belushi on Saturday Night Live because when Mr. Cocker sings, he looks like he's having a fucking aneurysm when he's singing, and Belushi went, even crazier while doing it.
So let's put Belushi in.
Well,
right? I mean, if that's going to be...
look, if it's the Comedy Hall of Fame, he's going. But look, and I listen, my father, interesting enough, big fan. He loved Joe Cocker.
Right.
And again, you're right. Lasting power of Joe Cocker. I think "You Are So Beautiful" is one of the great love songs of all time. I love that his voice cracks. I love that somebody left that in there, by the way. They didn't try to mask it because I think it adds to the song.
Sure.
But again, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? No, I don't think it's...
Who are some of the other folks?
Some of the other ones, let me see. Well, I'll pick one that I'm sorry.
Okay.
Billy Idol.
Yeah, I agree. Billy Idol should not go in.
No. I'm sorry. And by the way, Moni, sure, baby. You know what I mean? Like White Wedding, those are fun songs.
Fun songs.
But, you know, to me, he's a product of MTV.
Of course.
He looks good on TV, and he's got good rock songs. Got it. Moving on. Beyond that,
Eyes Without a Face, fantastic song.
Beautiful.
I love that song.
I love it.
But I mean, Billy Idol.
Who's talking about Billy Idol right now?
Billy Idol is the only guy.
Right. And Stevie Stevens. You know? More people are talking about Billie Eilish. Let's be honest.
Exactly. So, I mean, is she going to get in 25 years or 20 years?
And most likely, yes. I think that if she continues down her trajectory, you know, look, I don't know if she is or isn't. I would like to hope she is. Bjork.
Another great.
There's no way she can't be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think she's one of the most innovative artists of all time, female or otherwise.
Right.
You know.
Right.
With this list, Cyndi Lauper.
I love Cyndi Lauper.
I do too. And amazing voice. I mean, for all we talk about Mariah Carey, Cyndi Lauper's got a fucking great voice. And I think it gets lost because we think of her as the weirdo and from MTV with the funny hair and on. But when you listen to her sing, you realize, my God, she can sing. Oh, beautiful song. Beautiful
Goonies
song.
Are not enough.
But you definitely say,
Goonies aren't good enough.
How much of MTV helped her? Well, it helped her career. There's no doubt about it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? MTV helped a lot of people's career. That's not a bad thing on her. But you're right. Hall of Fame? I don't know.
I'm not against it. So. Yeah. I would be into her being in there, but you know, just based on on a Mariah Carey, and her career, I'd put Mariah Carey in.
If you're competing against those two, see, that's the sad part though too. Now
that's
we got to
competition.
We got to pit the two women against each other,
right?
That's not.
That's what I was talking about.
No, but you're right.
Listen,
I'm with you 100. I'll give you Black Crowes. I'm sorry.
That's I'm sorry.
Some guys who did a retro bullshit thing. Yeah. And don't get me. And by the way, that first album's got some songs I like on it or whatever. But again, a huge cover. You know, golly, I was just listening to a bunch of his shit this week too. I love not Wilson Pickett, but the other one, Otis Redding. Oh, yeah. You know, the "Hey Little Thing, Let Me Light Your Candle." You know, it's like Otis Redding's is better. We're good white guys. We don't need you to. We've already had. And I'm not mad at that, but we've had enough white guys, influence the blues and retell it to us. You know what I mean? Like, to me, I don't know. They were kind of a footnote. They had that one big album, and it's kind of it, right? And then the brothers hate each other. They reunite every now and again.
And I think the dude is famously known for marrying Kate Hudson.
Yeah. They occasionally do records with the Zeppelin guitar player, and then they get together and overcharge for tickets. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I'm all right with.
They could. They could take a flying leap as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, for sure.
Oasis. I'm not a fan.
I'm not a fan either, but I can see the importance of them. You know, I can recognize that.
But
I'm not,
I hear you, but the number one thing everybody says is they're the Beatles, right? I'm not saying they're a Beatles cover band, but boy, they're about as close as you can get. And we're gonna put them in the Rock and Roll Hall. The Beatles are already in. We're good. We don't need Oasis, you know. And by the way, Wonderwall may be one of my top 10 songs of all time. I love Wonderwall. Okay, I don't like any of their other songs, but I do love Wonderwall. I'm that guy. Okay, but at the same time, you're right on the influence. You can't deny their popularity.
Right.
They were huge. They beat Blur. They beat all the other ones.
They sold whatever amount necessary to be considered. Right.
Yeah. I mean, dude. So I get that, but yeah,
I could do without that.
I could too. This is one where I would definitely have to be objective. Fish.
No.
Yeah, I don't. I would sooner have my ears gouged out with needles than to listen to Fish.
I'd say I'd sooner be blind, but I already
Mission
beat myself
accomplished.
To that.
Fish, way to go, assholes. No. Not in any way, shape, or form.
No. And I'm sure, I hear that they put on great shows.
I'm sure of it.
And all props to them and the people that enjoy their music.
Absolutely. They've carved their own little niche. They do their own little thing.
Apparently, they also do like entire performances based on other people's albums.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Which is like, what? Like, I know we're not going to sit through like 1,600 minutes of one of their songs.
Right.
Because that would be, I mean, everyone would be dead at that point. Right?
And by the way, I blame them for Dave Matthews. That alone should keep them out.
That's another guy.
No. The next one, Soundgarden. I am torn on that one. I think they're, of the Seattle bands of that time, I think they're the best. Without a question. And I love Alice in Chains. And I love Tad. And I like a lot of others. But in terms of albums, I also have to say, and this may be controversial for some, they really only have two good albums. Bad Motorfinger and Super
Unknown. Yeah.
The other ones are good, but they're nowhere near those two. I don't know if that's enough to put you in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I don't know that their influence is as wide-reaching as their diehard fans would like to think.
That's a good point. And again, this is where it gets very hard to gauge anymore. Right. I don't know how many rock bands are citing them as an influence. It's a great point. Again, Bad Motorfinger may be in one of my top 10 records of all time. I love that record. I think Kim Thale is an underrated guitar player.
Yeah.
Chris Cornell has probably one of the greatest rock voices of all time. I mourn his loss. I think it sucks that Soundgarden isn't around anymore. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I don't know. You know what I mean? Yeah. I wouldn't be mad. I'd be happy as a fan.
Sure.
But as an objective, I have to decide who goes in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
They'd be on my border. They really would,
I'd probably put no on that one.
And again, of the bands, if I am only allowed to vote for so many, they would definitely get my vote because if I'm not giving it to Chubby Checker and I'm not giving it to Bad Company or the Black Crowes, they're going to get that vote from me. If I have to vote for 5 of them, they're going to be getting it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That is it of the list that we haven't talked about. We talked about Joy Division, New Order, Outcast. We spoke of them. So yeah, it's an interesting list. Again, last year, like I said, Foreigner got in.
Foreigner, yeah. So Foreigner, literally nobody in the original version of the band
is in the band right now.
Right. So
it hasn't been for years, by the way. They tour now. Interestingly enough, because they got in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, their Vegas shows, all of a sudden, 3 or 4 of the guys are going to show up and play with them.
Oh, what a coincidence.
Yeah, well, And by the way, their Vegas shows, I believe those tickets are close to about $200.
Yeah.
And you're seeing, as I joked previously with Nick, there are literally foreigners in Foreigner now, okay? There's no original members of this band. To be a legacy band, I get, and I understand that you want to hear Foreigner's big hits. Totally understand it. I have no problem with that. I don't want to hear them. But the idea that I could go to a place and spend $5 to see the cover band Jukebox Hero at the swap meet, or pay $200 because they legally are allowed to use the word foreigner, is absolutely ridiculous to me. And a band that, let's be honest, these guys can't possibly need any more money.
No, I mean, especially if they're playing that run of shows in Vegas at that place.
Oh,
they're gonna get paid,
dude. If the tickets are almost $200, you haven't even paid for parking. You haven't even paid for a drink.
Right.
I mean, these guys are making bank, dude.
That's $1,000 evening.
Easily. So yeah, when I see those kind of, and I think about this with a lot of Hall of Fames. I'm a bigger sports fan than you are in some regards. Certainly football. I'm a big football fan. There's a guy I listen to. He loves to lament Bob Greasy getting in with the Dolphins. When they had the perfect season and shit. He threw, I believe, 4 more passes than you and I did in the 1972 Super Bowl, and yet somehow is in the in the Hall of Fame of NFL. You kind of go, well, then all bets are off. If that's, you know what I mean? And again, those are people stuck in a moment. They remember that perfect season of the Dolphins. They remember, you know what I mean? It's like, right, I get it, but Bob Greasy couldn't hold a jock strap now in regular football. You know what I mean? And you know, you see this even in sports ones. When you start denying, like, why does it have to only be 5 to 7 goes in a year?
Because it used to be more, right?
I don't know. I don't know.
I think at one point they nominated a bunch and like something like more than 80 or 90 went in.
Okay,
Like, but that was early on.
Probably very early on to just kind of do a big sweep and get the right ones.
Also to have, you know, somewhat of a database of people already in, so people could be like, see?
Yeah, I would. It's certainly possible. But you go, why so precious with the number?
Exactly.
Look, if this list, if you believe all of these, which by the way, if you miss the list, you get put back on the list the next year.
Well, that's another thing. I don't understand the whole process anyway.
Well,
it's dumb to me, right?
yeah.
But the fact that like bands have to wait to be renominated to see if they get in, it's like, what
Well,
the
this
hell,
is
man?
why there's famously, I think you know this, where Ozzy with Sabbath just said, "Dude, just take our name off the fucking list. We're
Right.
done.
Yeah,
I don't give a shit."
Yeah.
You know, since then Sabbath has gone in, and now Ozzy just went in
Ozzy's,
last
yeah.
year.
Yep.
You know, let's not even get into the point also where Rolling Stone fucking hated Black Sabbath when they came out. Not that they're in charge of the entire, you know, Hall of Fame. It's just to say, you know, how
But their
things
voice
changed.
certainly spoke pretty loud.
Oh, yeah.
You know, back.
Well, it's interesting in a lot of ways. I read an interesting fact also. Eric Clapton, the
Yeah.
only person to be inducted 3 different times. Solo, Yardbirds, and Cream. And you go, well, yeah. I mean,
Right, yeah.
Cream, super influential. Super influential.
You know who should be
Please.
a nominee? Matt Pike
Oh, I
for Sleep and High on Fire. Influential, yes.
Huge.
Grammy winner.
Sleep Alone.
Sleep
Oh
Alone.
my God.
Yeah.
Well, it's like all the Beatles are in as the Beatles
And on their own.
and on their own.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are we doing? That's why I think
Well,
like
that
it's,
seems silly. I'm like, okay, listen. Again, the Beatles should absolutely be in it.
Sure.
That's not even a question.
are the Monkeys in?
You know what? I don't think they are.
And that's if they're not in, why not? They were as influential, I think.
I did
they
read
had their
a
own
thing, but I
TV
don't
show.
know for sure. It's a great point. You're not wrong. And I believe like Nesmith actually did write and say he didn't think it was that they should, and so on and so forth. But again, this is that thing. It's like we are rewarding art with an award, if you will.
Right.
You are to some degree saying this is better than the others.
Sure.
Well, huh? How?
And you know, like I kind of tried, I guess, touching on it
Please.
early on.
Please.
We have to consider who's doing the awarding.
Oh, for
right?
sure. For sure.
And the reasons why, which again, is the main reason I think it would work better as a museum with exhibits that maybe float from season to season. You know, like different exhibit.
Oh, they do. I believe that they have. There's the main, and then there's exhibits that change. I know.
No, but I'm saying like have everybody from the past, everybody who'd be considered legacy at
I
this
feel you.
point.
I feel you.
know, so like to kind of sidetrack a
please,
little bit.
please.
In Vegas, I think there's a punk rock
Right,
museum,
right.
which I know is a little controversial already in how it started up and the people behind it. But the fact that they just have bands in there, like some of their gear, maybe some pictures,
Right.
you know, maybe you don't recognize everything right off the
Right,
bat.
right.
But it's pretty, you know, standard fare for
Sure.
what people would consider punk,
Sure.
you know, and it's got all sorts of bands in there. Why not have something like that where like people kind of just donate the quote famous thing that you remember from when they hit, you know? So maybe have Kurt Cobain's guitar in the rock and roll museum, you know, next to Elvis's guitar, next to Rosetta Thorpe's guitar,
Right,
you
right.
know, and like, because this all, you wouldn't have this without this, without this.
And again,
right?
I think there are certain things. I'm almost positive the Kurt Cobain one. I think his guitar is in
It's
the Rock
there,
and Roll Hall of
yeah,
Fame.
yeah. That's
You
one
know,
that I do know. Yeah,
I wonder too if it's like a rotating thing. You know, like national museums don't half the shit's in the back.
right.
You know what I mean? They rotate shit out. There could be, you know, again, honestly, I'd love to visit it someday. I really would. I'm a
But
music fan.
I'm saying like, say for these nominees,
Please,
right?
yeah, I got you.
Why not have something of theirs that's in the museum without having to go through the whole process of like, you get in, you don't, you get in, you don't.
I think
You know?
I think it's again, it's they love the pageantry of it all, the pomp and circumstance.
Sure.
The big thing also at the end of the broadcast, they will usually pick one of the artists after they are inducted, somebody will perform one of their songs.
Right.
Sometimes they perform with that person. A lot of times it's somebody just doing a cover.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of famous ones where people have done jams afterwards.
Right.
The most famous one being, I think it was Clapton was on stage, Harrison was on stage, Tom Petty was on stage, and Prince.
Oh, shit.
And they started playing Harrison was not on stage. I believe it was for Harrison, and they were playing "While My Guitar Gently Weeps."
Nice.
Famously, Clapton plays the solo on that. Well, because they had this array of amazing guitarists up there, they went ahead and everybody got a solo. Well, if memory serves me, I believe Prince went last, or at least towards the end. And you watched a lot of guys who get a lot of flowers look and go, good God Almighty, I am not following that shit.
Right.
Like, wow, that guy can play a guitar.
Yeah.
You know? So those are kind of cool to see. And I think they look, these rock stars all have egos. They love to have them stroked.
Sure.
There's that. But I hear what you're saying. Like,
Because even with the pageantry, you could still have all that. You
Oh,
could
yeah.
say, hey, these are the nominees.
Sure.
These are the, not even the nominees. Let's get rid of them.
I got you. I got what you're
These
saying.
are the people being
This
put into
year-
the museum.
Yeah, this
right?
year, this list, this is who we're putting in this year.
Right.
Period. End of story.
And we're going to get them up there, and they're going to talk about their career.
Right on.
They're going to get so much amount of time, and should they perform? Cool for us. Should they not? Whatever.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you 100.
And maybe we'll have a jam session with the White Stripes, Outkast, and Mariah Carey.
Yeah.
Which would be fucking awesome.
Yeah,
right?
wow.
Like, imagine, Home Slice from Joy Division, Peter Hook coming in and playing a song with Mana.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
No.
Like, that would be fucking
Oh,
awesome.
it'd be
right?
amazing. Yes.
And it would add to the overall effect and, just
Yeah.
impact of music.
For sure.
Of rock.
For
music,
sure.
right?
And I think the musicians would think that would be pretty
Hell
cool, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Again, when you do a Hall of Fame in general, when you start awarding things in general,
Yeah.
you're already muddying the waters.
Big time. Yeah.
Like, I get it. Everybody, thought that, Driving Miss Daisy was a great film that year. And it's not a bad movie. But nobody's watching that movie anymore. And I believe Pulp Fiction lost to it.
Right.
A movie we're still talking about.
Yes.
So when you look at stuff like that, it makes it very difficult. And when you wait the 25 years, I do understand that because you don't want to be a prisoner of the moment.
Yeah.
But I do think when you look at something like, despite liking some of his music, Joe Cocker, I think you're being a prisoner of the moment.
Sure. Yeah.
You remember when he was big in a moment. But a lasting career, to a degree he did, but not the way Bob Dylan has had a lasting career, or Bruce Springsteen. Please.
Is Jim Morrison in the Hall of Fame?
The Doors definitely are.
Okay.
The Doors definitely
Okay.
are. Morrison alone, I do not think is. No.
As far as like lasting career, because a lot of people don't get to have long careers.
For sure.
Right. So, and because mainstream music and mainstream music industry kind of evolved to whatever it is now.
Right.
Where it's incredibly quick and people can't really get a grasp on it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, are we going to consider some of these people and maybe try to change that criteria? Because,
It's possible.
there's like, just
Please.
I think Taylor Swift would have to get in.
Oh, I can't see how she couldn't.
Because if she doesn't, that's a crime.
I couldn't agree more. Again, if we were talking about the history of rock and roll or music, however you want to call it, absolutely. Her impact right now is massive.
Yeah.
Like we said before, it's really just her and Beyonce at this point.
Sure. Yeah.
Everybody else is picking up scraps.
Right.
So, yes, those two have to go in. Again, it would be nice to see it evolve with the times to some degree. I think we're seeing that in some ways. Mania and fucking hip hop.
Yeah.
Those are big strides. Those are huge. That's a big deal. And I hope we continue with that. So, yeah, I'd like to think maybe as they do introduce more Tom Morellos and Questloves, and God knows if they could clone another David Grohl, they'd put him in. But,
I think he's busy working on that.
Well, yeah, I'm surprised he's just not in charge at this point, telling Motorhead stories all day long. Anyway, the point is like, God, I would like to be in that room. Is he in there going like, look, man, it's called The Obsessed. They were a fucking great band, and we really should put them in. You know what I mean? Like, you had Wino on your fucking, they're Voivod. I'm telling you guys, they're fucking amazing. It would be interesting. Anyway, all that is to say is, look, there are genres we all know probably will never get it. Black metal's never going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Right.
Like
yeah.
Emperor's not going into the Rock and Roll Hall. Ulver will not go into the Rock and
Ulver,
Roll
yeah,
Hall of
fuck
Fame.
yeah.
You know,
Fucking Dark Throne.
yeah, right. Now, to me, I'm okay with that. This is why I don't put so much stock in it either. Being products, as you and I are, of underground music or music that has never been part of the mainstream.
Yeah.
You through punk to metal, myself just through metal. Like, I never gave a shit if they got their flowers from the
sure.
nightly news. Who
Right.
gave a shit? I didn't care that Metallica didn't go into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I don't need, quite frankly, again, back to football. You know, the quarterback for my favorite team, the Raiders, Jim Plunkett, is the only two-time winning Super Bowl quarterback not in the Hall of Fame. Okay? That pisses me off because of the criteria of what they've put in and people that they have put in.
Yeah.
But I don't need them to tell me that Jim Plunkett was one of the great quarterbacks for my fucking team.
Right.
And by the way, I think Jim Plunkett deserves to be in, and I do think he deserves to get his flowers. But I'll tell you this, Jim Plunkett never pulls his wallet out anywhere in Oakland or anywhere in L.A.
Yeah.
and now anywhere in Vegas.
Right.
Because there's a Raider fan there to say, that's on me, Mr. Plunkett.
Right.
So he gets flowers in that way. But there is something to be said to be honored for your career in that. And especially, I think, with Halls of Fames, with sports where they do it right, and obviously they're doing it a little bit here, is there is a committee that goes to older guys. It becomes players. So old players now, not reporters, not whiny guys that he didn't talk to me, so I'm not voting for him.
I even
You
think
get
that's
players.
a little skewed because why wouldn't a person like, what's his name? I'm going to get it wrong. Jim Abbott, the one-armed pitcher?
Yeah.
That dude pitched a no-hitter.
Yes.
Right? With one arm.
Yeah. Maybe there's even a part of him that kind of goes, but do we want to, like, we don't want to look like the ones who voted for the one-arm guy. But it is incredible. It is incredible.
Right?
And by the way, influence, I don't know that matters in baseball, but you can't tell me there weren't children who watched that guy with his one arm pitch and whatever thing may not have been perfect with them and say, I'm inspired by that.
Well, be the kind of the spokesperson for the disabled community,
please.
How many people with any sort of physical disability were able to see that or hear about it?
Oh,
and
yeah.
Say, holy shit, I might want to do that too.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So the influence is
absolutely.
there, right? The
for
accomplishment
sure.
and the influence.
Yeah. No,
right?
Again, these are, like I say, Hall of Fames in general. When you award anything, sports are a little easier because there's some categories you can look at. You know what I mean? There's a batting average or touchdowns or wins. I get that. But especially with art, when you start awarding these things, the waters get very muddy.
Incredible.
What affects you does not affect the other person.
Like another person that I would put in is my beloved Glennard Anzalone Danzig.
Absolutely.
For being such a fucking
gets all my votes.
Stick in the mud. Like
yeah. But musically,
he's done it.
Misfits, Sam Hain, and Danzig, we're good.
Right?
We're in.
Yeah.
Because Misfits alone.
Yeah.
Misfits should be in there, I don't know how they're not.
Yeah.
I mean, I do. But you know what I mean? It's like, yeah. And then you do wonder, how much of the game do you have to play?
I mean, ultimately, I think that's a big part of it,
I think
too,
it's huge.
Because if you're not a darling to whomever is putting this together,
right,
which is the record labels, the magazines, and blah blah blah.
Well, they do say this is why the voters, not the group with Dave Grohl and the rest of them, but the voters, the 1,200 people that they send this list out to see how to get the votes. That's why they are anonymous, because they do not want them to be influenced by outside things. I have a hard time believing that all 1,200 of them don't tell somebody, I vote for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So, the same way Weinstein can put a little money in somebody's pocket to vote for his movies back in the day. You can't. Shakespeare in Love, nobody's fucking talking about Shakespeare in Love. No. So, yeah. I'm with you. I've never been a fan in the sense of thinking that they were the authority or that they set the precedent or that this was the people to go off of.
Honestly,
I enjoy it, and I think it's a necessary evil, if you will. But yes, for people to get their feathers all ruffled because their favorite band didn't get put in this year, to some degree, don't worry, wait till next year.
It's the same reason not that I don't understand. It's the same reason I am tired of seeing people whine about who the halftime performers are, or what movie won what
Yeah.
for the Oscars,
Yeah.
and who won what for the Grammys and all these other Emmys and Tonys and all this shit. Like it's dumb. It's dumb. Like all these things change. Everything's gonna progress to a place where you might not be comfortable, but like it or not, that's where it's going.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. I mean, again, I see. Especially you bring up like Super Bowl halftimes. Like I see them much differently than people because I'm a football fan. I don't really give a shit who's performing on the halftime.
Sure.
That's not what's bringing me to the table.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But at the same time, like, yeah, I don't. Number one, you can't please all the people all the time. I don't give a shit who they put on the halftime show. Somebody's not going to like it. You know what I mean? Right. But I've never watched one that somebody didn't put on a pretty damn good show. If it's just the fact of a show, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're giving 100%. They're out there making it happen. It's not just some guy with a strum and a guitar and singing into a microphone. Like, they're putting on a show, everybody. Like, come on,
I mean, just the fact that you're in front of so many people and you're doing basically a medley of all your hit songs.
Oh, the choreography that goes on.
To get the timing right and everything. Like, oh my God. Like,
yes. Good on you just getting
some
it
of
done.
these people that complain can't even fucking stand through a set at the local, VFW hall. Or
I don't know if you saw it was one of my favorites that went around is, of course, people, I can't understand what Kendrick said. Then my favorite was people like 30-something-year-old guys saying they can't understand Kendrick. Same 30-year-old guy, and it's Pearl Jam.
Oh,
Like,
Amy showed me that.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck you're saying either, but you don't mind that one.
But it's tiring when like metal dudes say that.
For sure.
Right? And it's like, well, you just linked everybody to your favorite death metal song or black metal song.
I couldn't understand it. Anyway.
Right, yeah.
Here's Cryptopsy and Lord Worm. Like, those aren't even words. Yeah, Obituary literally didn't even have words on their first album. Like, yeah, exactly. I know. That one always bothered me. Like, of all my friends, there were 2 or 3 of us that still liked hip hop. I mean, look, as you and I were kids in the 90s, this is when hip hop is in its golden era. So there were a couple of us that, we did, but man, you'd hear the other, I always heard rap is crap. That's what I, over and over. Now the new one I see is rap is like candy, or music is like candy. You throw away the rappers. Like, oh, good Lord. I saw a guy on, it's one of these things on Twitter. Rap is not music, and I will die on this hill. Okay, cool, man. How is it not music?
That hill is incredibly populated and fucking. It's just hard to walk on.
There's a guy at my work that said that one time. He's like, "I'm sorry, I just don't think rap is music." And I was like, "Why is it not music?" He said, "Well, because they don't sing." And I was like, "Okay, so you just got rid of 90% of classical music, 98% of jazz.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to get rid of?" Well, I'm just saying. I know what you're just saying. You don't understand it and you don't like it.
Right.
That's not the same thing as it's not music.
I wonder if they would hold these same sentiments if they heard something like Cocteau Twins or Lisa Gerrard, where famously, I have no idea what the fuck they're saying, but I love the music.
Of course.
Right?
No. Well, this is, how many people freak out when I play music? Never mind like death metal stuff.
Right.
When I play stuff that's not in English.
Oh, yeah.
They're singing in Japanese or they're singing in Spanish.
Yeah, yeah.
And people at my work are like, how can you listen to that? What do you mean? Well, you don't even know what they're saying. Well, who gives a shit what they're saying? The music, are you not moved by this?
Yeah, yeah.
So to me, it's like, again, these are, we're a little bit of a tangent there, but yeah, I'm with you. Look, to me, you're going to do a museum that you want to title it rock and roll or whatever, fine. That's inclusion of everybody.
Everything.
It's because you're essentially putting a delineation that says rock and roll. Granted, gotcha. So the Pat Boones, although a piece of shit probably is in there. Yeah. But, essentially, although Miles Davis, I believe, is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So again, you guys didn't bat an eye for that, which I have no problem with, by the way. But, again, so essentially you're cutting off I was going to say Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett, but no, I think they're both in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So, you are making a delineation. You're saying music prior to the invention of rock and roll, however you define that. Right. Little Richard, Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, that sort of thing. Okay, everything before that is not coming in, but everything after that, then absolutely should.
Well, or everything after that, but
Well, they do the
Right.
butt. Yeah, right. They're gonna and they're gonna be butts. Certainly, music we love.
Right.
We're never gonna see Glenn Benton up there thanking the
Which would
Academy.
be fucking awesome,
It would
right?
be fucking insane. You know, the closest we're gonna get is Ozzy's and Lemmy's and
Sure.
Judas Priest's, maybe Iron Maiden. You know, Deep Purple's not in. You know what I mean? Again, not a huge Deep Purple fan, but you cannot deny their influence,
Right.
their
Yeah.
musicality, the things that they brought on. You know what I mean? When your keyboard player is about as damn good as your guitar player, like you got a fucking kick-ass band, dude, and they should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame sooner than Joe Cocker, sooner
Yes.
than Billy Idol.
Sooner that Bad Company.
Yes. Oh,
I mean, come
very-
on, man.
It's not even a contest, and I'm not a huge fan of either of them.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's like, Smoke on the Water alone, you should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And
I
they
would
may
even-
be.
I would even put them before Oasis.
Oh, this is not even. Come on,
Right.
please. That's
I mean, that's
no,
maybe
I-
like my personal.
I,
thing,
no,
but
no. I'm with you. It's not even close. I don't know. Again, I love Wonderwall. I honestly love that song. I'm not
You
no
guys don't
bullshit.
hear it, but he's playing it right now.
Anyway, brother, here it is. Wonderwall. I really, really love that song. But I don't find them to be innovative in any way, shape, or form, or even a band that changed anything.
Right.
They were a band that had a moment, and they made great records that people loved. No doubt about it. But they did not do anything to shake up the world of music in a way that New Order and Joy Division did.
Sure.
You know, you could say the famous line about the Velvet Underground, right? Not many people saw the Velvet Underground, but everyone who did started a band.
Right.
Because they were so different, so influential, so outside of the mainstream that everybody who heard it went, I got to start a band. I
Yeah,
want to.
yeah.
I want. There's before and after. There's the Beast. Even with the Beatles, right? The Beatles hear Pet Sounds and go, "Holy crap, we got to step up our game, dude." And prior to that is the Beach Boys hearing Rubber Soul, going, well, "Okay, enough of this fucking teeny bopper shit. We got to step it up, dude."
Yep.
And it's like, so there's a bit. I Want to Hold Your Hand to Sgt. Pepper is a giant fucking leap.
Sure.
So that's why you go in. I don't hear Oasis doing that.
No.
I don't hear Billy Idol doing that. Who's sitting around saying, my biggest influence is Billy Idol?
I mean, like you said, Steve Stevens.
Well,
Right?
he's his biggest paycheck.
Yeah,
You know? Please, Billy, let's
Job
do another reunion
security,
show.
right?
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? And it's nothing against him. He has a great career. The guy's never dug a ditch in his life.
Right.
People want to hear his songs. Play them. Go ahead. Be a movie star. Do whatever you want to do. I'm not against your career.
You know who I would put in there that is most likely not in there? Susie Sue from Susie and the Banshees.
I would put big money on it. She's not in there. Absolutely not. Again, Susie and the Banshees, hugely influential.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. Again, a lot of those early new wave goth, like I think The Cure is in.
Is Blondie in there?
Of course.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
because she invented rap.
Yeah.
Right. So, of course she's in there.
To some, they did. To Blondie, look, to Blondie's credit, they do not say that themselves.
No,
you
I
know?
know.
But yeah, no, I know. It's like, they do like to take a lot of credit for the fact that, yes, they brought the first rap group on to Saturday Night Live and let them play, no doubt. But for sure they're in there. I think they're deserving.
What
but
about a band like Green Day? Like, are they in there?
you know what? I need to look. I gotta know for sure because, wow, that's a great question. I'm gonna look it up. Talk amongst yourselves.
I know,
everybody.
because I know, like, folks have their opinions about the band. I know I have mine, but to deny the
Yes.
impact,
in
they are in there?
2015.
Okay, all right. There you go.
I mean, my personal opinion on them is I still own Dookie. I love that record. If it's not punk, I'm not going to have that argument with
Yeah.
you. I'm no authority on the genre. I love that record. I think they made a great pop punk record. I don't like anything else after that. Their impact with stuff like American Idiot, you can't, or whatever the anti-Bush album that they
Yeah.
did or whatever. It's hugely influential. It's a major impact. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I don't necessarily have a problem with them being in.
Then
Like,
I
I'm not
would
a fan of
also-
Nirvana. Nirvana's definitely in,
Yeah.
and they should.
I would have also put bands like Rancid in there, probably.
They are not. I'm sure of it, and I don't think they will.
That's
To
a shame
them,
because
Green, like Black Flag, I'm sure.
I mean,
is
I
not
would
in.
definitely put Black Flag
I
over all
think-
those bands.
I don't.
So.
Well, they especially before Green Day.
Sure. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
no offense to Green Day, just to say, again, why that? I think that's the biggest one for a lot of people because it encompasses all of it. Is why the out of order?
Right.
How do you put Green Day and you haven't put Black Flag in?
Yeah.
There is no Green Day without Black Flags.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And let's be honest, Black Flag's not even the first one, right?
No.
Like, there's plenty you can put in. I mean, I promise you, I know for a fact the Sex Pistols are in.
Oh, yeah.
Which, again, I don't necessarily have a problem when you look at influence, when you look at their impact. You know what I mean? To some degree, they have both of those things.
I also would have argued, and we touched on this on one of the last episodes,
Yes.
where their origin story.
Yes.
Like, it's a
Manufactured. Yes.
Right? So it's like, it's manufactured to get to this place, and now that it got there, we're going to congratulate ourselves for recognizing that it got to that place.
Hey, everybody, they love the flavor of Coke, and we've sold millions of it.
Exactly.
We're awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like Kiss. I don't think they should go in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Is Kiss. Do I agree with that?
I mean, I guess I'm talking more about my fandom more than anything else, because you definitely, the impact, it's huge. But
I'm an
they
on
are
and off again Kiss fan.
Look, they have songs that I do like, but money was always the object more than making great songs.
The Psycho Circus period was pretty. I mean, all of their shows have been pretty.
Live shows unbeatable.
So
I'm with you.
performance
Yes.
and like the influence though, like.
I think that
because
the show, right?
Yeah.
I mean, despite now we know their live album is essentially bullshit in a lot of ways.
Right, yeah,
that
yeah.
was a huge thing.
mean-
Not that they were the first to do a live album, but to say, that live albums were marketable. You could make money off of a live album.
I think it's pretty well known that Kiss also single-handedly created the black metal look of corpse paint and. I would put him in.
Sorry, everybody, my leg was being pulled.
I would put him in.
No,
I would put him in.
I guess I wouldn't be against it, and I would understand it, especially something like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but I wouldn't be happy about it. Because I just think I think they represent everything that is. Not
They're also one
right
of
about rock.
those. I know there's way more diehard fans out there
Sure.
than I will ever be, but they do have some really good songs.
Oh, for sure.
But the majority of their catalog
Yeah.
is very middle of the road.
Yes, sir.
Right? So it's like,
And how many of them were written by Desmond Child or
Exactly.
50 other people? I mean, they tried to buy Pentagram songs at one point. So yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Pentagram.
they would definitely
Right?
be in for me.
Trouble.
I'm not a fan, but I mean, to me, the big three of Pentagram, Saint Vitus, and Trouble, yeah, I think they
go
deserve.
in. Yeah, they go in.
They would definitely be in. They would be
Especially
in my
if
rock
Black
and roll.
Sabbath goes in.
Oh, for sure.
Black Sabbath goes in. Those other three go in.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Right,
Because
so-
they carry on the legacy that,
Yeah.
that absolutely. And I'm not a Trouble fan, but those other two I'm a massive fan of. So, yes. I mean, again, you and I could name bands that we definitely think should go in all day long.
I like our version of this. museum better.
And this is what they always say. Well, then start your own Rock and Roll Hall
Yeah,
of Fame.
yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean,
okay, that's not, like, that's why, to some degree, I do appreciate the Punk Rock Hall of Fame, because they pretty much went like, well, fuck you then. We'll start our
We're
own.
gonna
And,
just put in stuff.
yeah,
and, if you
and
like
we'll
it, cool.
we'll appeal to the punk rockers then.
Yeah,
They'll come
yeah.
see the Black Flag shit here because you don't have it there.
right.
You know?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, again, it's. I always find it to be an interesting discussion, which is why we are doing this right now, but not one that I lose any sleep over whatsoever.
Oh,
I
no.
never have. I don't. Whether it's, and you're right, whether it's Grammys, Oscars, I do love to see bands that I love get praise.
Sure.
Of course, and I love to see them get their flowers. I get to stand up to a group of people who are happy to see them get their flowers, but it's not necessary.
No.
I don't need you. It wasn't like I was on the border of going, I don't know, is Motorhead a great band? Oh wait, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Well then, clearly they are a great band.
yeah.
Like I didn't need that.
Because you'd think that the adoration and the attention would be experienced just by going out and going on tour.
Oh sure.
For whatever amount of time those
Yeah.
bands were around.
Well,
right?
and again, back to where we're kind of almost full circle, but coming back, remember who started this?
yes.
They were not musicians.
Right.
These were corporate people who, by the way, Rolling Stone sells magazines when you
Yes.
tell people who's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh, yeah.
Ahmet Ertegun trying to get many of his artists in there. You can always, by the way, much like when you win an Oscar or when you win a Grammy or any other award, it is forever attached to your name.
Mm-hmm.
2-time Grammy winner, 4-time Oscar winner,
Yep.
Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, it is one of those things where you say, like, yeah, I do think that the push to do it isn't coming from
It becomes
musicians.
a hype sticker.
It absolutely is. And again, it's not coming from musicians. It is coming from industry people.
Right.
They thought this was necessary.
Yeah.
And while I do want to give them benefit of the doubt to say they did think some of it was about preserving this thing that has changed the world,
Sure.
I can't pretend for a second that it also wasn't like, and if it sells a few more thousand albums, that's really good too.
I mean, from there we can look at what's getting put out on like Record Store Day.
Yeah.
You know, when people have the 20th version of the same album coming out on Record Store Day, and it's like the 4 LP version,
Right.
worth $300.
Right. But
What
this
do we-
one has a new demo.
Right. Like this one's been remastered.
right,
You know.
right.
So yeah. It's like, what are we doing? Come on. Yeah.
It's
But
you know,
yeah,
look, the music industry has always been about money. Always.
always
From
yeah.
day one. Everybody's owned you know, for the most part, every one of them have been people who are trying to rip off the artist and get as much money away from them and put it in their pockets as possible.
Yeah.
You know, and God knows the artists have done it to each other with Led Zeppelin going, "Who's Blues guys? I'm no Muddy Waters, never heard of them. I have no idea. No, that was our song. We wrote that. You know,
Yeah.
so and they're not alone in that. It's just to say, you know, this is unfortunately this is the ugly business of the music business.
Yeah.
And it does touch the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, though. But again, every year it comes up, and every year the discussion is the same. The newest one is the hip-hop part. Otherwise, the discussion has always been, Band X should have already been in, and I can't believe you didn't put them in.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. So, you know, that's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Take it for what it is.
Yeah.
Love it or leave it. I choose to leave it.
Well, I hope to go there someday. I honestly, I do. I think it's unfortunately I have to go to Cleveland. No offense to people in Cleveland.
I hope to use their bathroom facilities one day. You know, hopefully those are adequate. But
I
yeah.
hear it flushes to Love Me Tender from Elvis.
Yeah, right. And I will understand. But yeah, so hopefully you guys dug this. All right. And now that we've talked enough about the Music Hall of
Some would say
Fame.
too much.
Yeah, right. What have you been listening to?
Let's see. I've been getting into some. I've fallen down some holes. Waylon Jennings.
Okay.
One of those country guys that I've really wanted to explore. You know, a lot of those older ones, they have such a discography that it's like, where do I begin? Where do I even, start?
Yeah.
I like a lot of his stuff, so I was deep diving into him. Another podcast that I listened to did a whole episode on Otis Redding, so I listened to a couple of his albums. Just what a voice.
Oh yeah.
Who else did our music party that we do from time to time.
Yeah.
I definitely walked away from there. I think the big winner for me was the band Dozer that somebody played. I was listening to that album about 4 or 5 different times this week. Another one, your wife having to play it, Vision of Disorder.
Hell yeah.
They are a band that I seem to forget a lot, and every time I'm reminded, I say to myself, why do I keep forgetting about these
Super
guys?
good band. Super
You
good
know,
band.
the first two especially, Imprint and the self-titled. I just, those albums
Yeah.
are so good. Typo Negative, especially towards the end of the week there. And the other one that I dined on quite a bit since our last one was Acid Bath. Since
that big show's coming up.
absolutely that will be attending in August.
Yeah,
it was
7
nice
months.
to go ahead and just kind of speed through both of those albums.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's about it. I mean, the little bands here and there. My listening schedule, I usually have a CD in the car on the way to work and on the way back that I listen to just one CD. And my job allows me to pretty much play music all day long. So, but I will, there are certain bands that, through the week I will dine on a little more than others, but there's always something playing. I usually have music going. How about yourself? What you got?
I've been doing a John Carpenter deep dive.
Okay.
Love his work, all of it, right? From all the movies he's done, and just from like the stuff he's done with his son.
Okay,
like
that's what I was gonna ask you. Okay.
Yeah, all that stuff is awesome.
Right on.
There's this band called Goblin from Italy.
Oh yes, okay.
Right?
The name certainly, yeah.
Yeah, they do all the horror movie soundtrack stuff. Yeah, they're awesome as well. I actually was, I was also listening to Illuvium, which I've mentioned before.
Oh yeah.
And this music started that I was not aware of. So it just started up randomly, but I don't know if it's a group or not. but the people are called Joshua and Leon,
Oh, okay.
and the album is called 21.
21,
I think
okay.
it is, and it's kind of sad music, kind of atmospheric type stuff.
Okay.
They've got a lot of spoken word type stuff on it.
Okay.
Everything's really depressing.
Speaking my language.
Yeah, it's like the album. I think it's like an hour and 40 minutes.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
A bunch of songs on there. Some of them are really short,
Okay.
but it's pretty good. Especially when in LA here where we are located, it was raining recently. So, on the rainiest day of that week, this album came on, and I was like, yeah, this is good.
Nice.
It's good rainy day music.
Yeah, Grouper is one of those rainy day musics for me, but unfortunately it was raining while I was at work, and I work around a lot of machinery, and if there's one album, if there's an artist you're not going to hear over machinery, it's Grouper. So
So mainly that. I was listening to some Dead Can Dance and one of my absolute favorite bands, Christian Death.
Oh, right on.
Love Christian Death. I could listen to them forever, but it has to be probably the first three with Roz Williams. I am a big time Roz Williams guy,
Right on.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. Any movies?
I watched the Saturday Night Live movie that just came out. I think it's called Saturday Night. It profiles the night of the first episode of Saturday Night Live. So what you get is like a behind the scenes. It's like once it starts, it just starts. It's very frantic, very. Jason Reitman directed it. He describes it as a comedy thriller. You definitely feel panic. You feel, we're right up against it.
Yeah.
Things that I loved about it were the people doing, Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, the Lorne Michaels,
Yeah.
These are people who, certainly for you and I, are identifiable. We hear their voice. We know who these people are. So it was very interesting to see these people who played them, mainly because there were some similarities in their look and even in their voice, but they were never doing an impression as much as it was just like certain little winks, eyebrow raises that you're just like, oh, that's eerie. They did the thing I think is actually more difficult than say like Rich Little doing like, hey everybody, I'm Jody Curson kind of thing. It's capturing their essence.
That's
like
cool.
There were moments where you're like, oh my god, it really feels like Chevy Chase is there. The Dan Aykroyd guy especially, the Garrett Morris guy. Honestly, there's moments where you're like, are you sure that's not Garrett Morris? Like This is amazing. I enjoyed it. It's unfortunately like one of those movies that I find myself doing with a lot of movies like that, where I go, I'm enjoying this, but how much of this actually happened and how much of this is making it for a movie, how much of this was somebody's talking about, So you just go like, if this was a documentary, I think I'd like it a little bit more, just because at least then I would know what actually happened to a degree, But I found it very enjoyable. Reitman's a good director. He makes good movies. I really liked it. Other than that, Blade 2, Something About Mary. Again, I've only seen these movies 1,000 times, so, I need to get 1,000 more in.
Yeah, of course.
The wife and I actually started it Friday night. I do not hesitate to admit seeing it because I don't care. I don't have things that I'm ashamed of. Red One. It is the Christmas movie with The Rock and the guy from Whiplash.
Yes. Yeah.
Santa is kidnapped. Unfortunately, my wife watched way more of it than I did because I actually fell asleep. But I was enjoying it. It was actually pretty good. I mean, again, I was not expecting Citizen Kane, nor was I given Citizen Kane. But it was good. It had moments that I enjoyed. It was fun. I like stuff that The Rock usually does, Other than that, watched a thing on YouTube. I don't know why. I'm not even that much of a fan, but it was some guy just put together a little thing. Mainly, what he was trying to do was give Poison Ivy her credit. It was a thing about the Cramps.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was really neat. As a band, I'm not a huge fan of. I don't know much about. I learned quite a bit, and I didn't realize. I knew she was the guitar player, but
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much the music she wrote, and
Yeah,
it's like and I guess that's my own to a degree sexism of just like, well, why couldn't she? You know what I mean?
Right.
Just never thought of it. That was pretty neat. But yeah, other than that, usually there's about 30 movies that I've probably watched 1,000 times.
Yeah.
How about yourself? Anything new or just the usuals?
A couple usuals.
Okay.
Earlier in the week, I was watching Batman and Robin.
Was that the
Mr. Freeze?
yes,
Schwarzenegger,
okay.
and
was it Clooney, right?
Clooney.
The nipples.
The nipples. Chris O'Donnell plays
Yes, that's it.
the
That's what-
50-year-old young ward of Bruce Wayne.
At some point, it's called Freeloader, kid.
Yeah.
You're old enough to get a job.
Right.
Alicia
Silverstone is in there.
That's right.
Uma Thurman plays
That's
Poison Ivy.
right.
Speaking of Poison
Yeah,
Ivy,
right.
right?
Coincidental.
Yeah. Fun movie. Once you realize that Joel Schumacher was going for that 60s Batman kind of feel.
I forgot that he had directed it. That's right.
Yeah. So like once you understand that,
Sure.
I think you're able to enjoy the dialogue, the way the movie's edited, the lighting in the movie, because it's very stark colors in there. Not
Yeah.
that I can see it, but like I remember.
No, yeah. I think I've only seen it once. I'd really have to
Check
go
it
back.
out because
Okay.
it's got a weird version. This really weird version of Bane.
Oh,
When
really?
you compare it
Okay.
against Tom Hardy's Bane, you're just like,
Sure.
what the fuck? Right?
Wow.
But
okay.
it's cool. It's like, it's pretty cool.
All right.
I think Schwarzenegger just eats the scenery
Wow,
when
you
he's on, because at one point he's on there and he's Mr. Freeze,
Right.
everything's cold,
Right.
freezing, but he's smoking a stogie.
Right.
Like, what are you doing, guy? Come on, right?
They let the man cook.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I watched that and had fun with that. Amy and I started watching a series that's, I guess, a couple of seasons in already.
Okay.
It's on Max called Bookie.
Yeah. Okay. How is it?
We like it.
Okay,
We like it a
all
lot.
right.
It's funny. It's not like overly funny.
I
Some of
gotcha.
the stuff is kind of cliche and whatever. You can see it coming a mile away, but
Yeah.
it's funny.
All right.
Sebastian Maniscalco.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of him.
I
think that's
love
what's kept
that
me-
guy.
Do you?
I
Okay.
love that
All
dude.
right.
Yeah.
That's what's kept me away from it more than it's like everything HBO does is usually really good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm just not a fan of him. So I
I like
All right.
him. For some reason, I didn't want to watch it, but she put it on, and
All right.
I had a great time.
All right.
And then recently it was Valentine's Day here, so
Mm-hmm.
she and I decided to watch what I guess is one of our Valentine's Day movies now, Dread,
Oh.
which fucking great movie.
Yeah, that was one that you recommended to me because I had seen the Sylvester Stallone one and it's
Yes,
kind of
and-
but you had told me no, the Dread. See,
Carl
it's
Urban,
way
yes.
better. And
Carl
yeah.
Urban. I forget the
Oh.
actress who plays Anderson.
then
But
the-
also Lena
Lena-
Headley,
Yes.
who plays Mama Madrigal.
Yeah.
Which Amy once dressed up as for Halloween.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was fucking bloody as hell, right? So, yeah, that movie is awesome.
Influenced by the I realize thing that now the what's the one where they go into the building the Raid.
Well, people think that
Oh, okay.
they were actually filmed at the same time.
Were they intro? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because I love that it's like a one set,
one set,
and that's it. You
yeah,
know what I
the
mean? Like,
building.
once
and
we're in here, we're
you
not leaving.
Get from the bottom to the top and then back down.
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So,
Interesting.
I love this movie. It's so gritty. So he plays obviously the Dread character a lot closer to what the comic is like.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There were a couple of, I don't know if there were just 2 issues, maybe a small run of comics that kind of worked as a sequel to the movie. Because
Oh, okay.
famously, it doesn't have a sequel,
Right.
even though it's wide open for one.
Right.
Yeah, but that movie is so good.
It is.
And it's gory, and
Yeah.
the story's great. It moves, pretty
Yeah.
quickly.
Oh yeah. No, I
Right? It's great. It's
It's
great.
one of your many great recommendations
Yeah, so
of movies I normally would have passed on.
yeah, that movie is awesome. So we watched that and a lot of fun, just kind of hanging out, eating pizza and cake.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, my wife and I, when it comes to I think what we consider our romantic movies are Natural Born Killers and Mandy. So,
Speaking of, did you ever see Maggie? Not my
yes, with small, barks a lot.
Yeah, doesn't like me.
Yeah, right. Completely hates me.
Yeah.
Well, that's every woman. But yes, Schwarzenegger has the daughter turns into
To a zombie.
zombie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that movie's awesome as hell.
I-
I've been wanting to find it again so I could watch it again.
Where did
you know?
yeah, it's one of those ones. It comes on like once every year for 4 weeks on
Yeah.
like Hulu.
Came and went. Yep.
Yeah, I remember that was also one of those ones where you're like, oh, look who's doing a little acting.
Yes,
Finally.
totally. Yes.
Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's I know people love the Mandy. I actually still have not seen that movie.
Oh, it's one of my all-time.
You know, but Maggie.
Yeah,
oh,
it's good.
Man, that one
No,
was good. as
I
well.
think it's that's a good one. It's not one I watch all the time, but I definitely enjoy the hell out of it when I see it for sure.
Yeah, so that's what we were listening to and viewing / also listening to. But yeah, so hopefully you guys dug that. If as usual, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, hit us up.
Please.
The email is therehearsalroompod@gmail.com, all one word. You can find us on Instagram at the Rehearsal Room Pod, and now on Facebook under the same name. Please be patient. We're streamlining everything as we go. Aaron and I have no idea what we're doing, but we're finding out and working on stuff as we go. So hopefully we'll catch you guys next time.
All right.